Now, according to the EU's Dublin regulation, refugees seeking asylum in European countries must do so in the first country they reach. That member state then becomes responsible for their resettlement. Being one of Europe's main arrival points, Italy's administrative system is currently overflowing with asylum demands, and processing that can take up to 2 years. Think about it, that's 2 years without work, which has very adverse effects on the integration of these migrants. Now, to avoid this, the Italian government has launched an official plan for their assimilation, and some cities actually stand out by making this a priority through personalised training and employment programmes. That's the case for the city of Bologna. Our correspondent reports.
Richard has had a long and difficult journey. Alone and only 17 years old, he fled the violence in Nigeria by crossing the Niger and the Sahara Desert before finally arriving in Sabratha, in the south of Libya, where he fell into the hands of the traffickers.
They are gunmen. They used to torture us. They used to beat us. They don't used to feed us. They used to maltreat us in that place, and they used to kill some of us. So I was lucky I survived.
After 2 months of imprisonment, Richard managed to get aboard a boat to reach Europe. He was rescued in the Mediterranean and landed in Italy. He was then taken to Bologna in the north, a city that provides a personalised integration process for each asylum seeker.
Buongiorno.
I'm going to ask you a few questions to understand what are your interests and your professional aspirations. Where do you see yourself working in the future?
I dream of becoming a great chef. I love cooking.
We try and evaluate their skills and abilities, especially those that are necessary for taking on a job, and see if they can learn these skills here.
After a training period, Richard managed to get an internship in this restaurant. By getting involved here, the objective is to learn hands-on some traditional recipes of Italian cuisine.
The recipes are very different to the ones he knows, but despite that, he learns quickly. We started with easy recipes, and then we increased the difficulty.
I've learned so many things in this place. It's very useful. Maybe if I can't even work in this place, like I've learned the things in this place, I can go to other restaurants and work there and use that experience that I use in this place.
Like Richard, each one of the other 900-odd asylum seekers and refugees in the Bologna province benefit from a professional training scheme.
Our intention is to facilitate social integration for each and every person. They must be able to use their skills or acquire them here. That's the real goal. It's much more than providing only housing and food.
Integration, even in the sector symbolic of Italian excellence, like the fashion industry.
Today we're going to make an apron, so we have to take measurements. First the bust. It's all about making use of the time these people have to wait for their asylum request to be processed in Italy. It's an opportunity.
There are 18 students being trained in this workshop, and they are all asylum seekers. For 5 months, they will be trained in sewing and making leather goods.
So we're going to reproduce that handbag over there. That one.
Francesco Panzola is a master craftsman. He has been making leather handbags for big Italian fashion brands for over 30 years.
It's a handcraft trade that you learn by doing, by working the different types of leather. They're highly motivated. When they start a bag, it's hard to stop them, even to go have lunch, because they become passionate about the work.
It doesn't take long to see the results. The products manufactured were shown at the pret-à-porter fashion shows in Italy, and a student has already been given a permanent job. Pietro Pinto is an economist. Over the last few years, he has been studying the effects of the presence of asylum seekers on the Italian economy.
Italy benefits from their presence on purely economic terms. If we compare the cost of migration to the amount of money it generates for the state, we find a credit balance of 2 billion euros. Even with the cost of healthcare, training, legal fees, food and housing included, the return on investment is positive.
Increase productivity by also encouraging entrepreneurship. This small business management training program aims to motivate the participants to create their own businesses.
Here we try to channel their business ideas and explain how to make them a reality.
The class participants get the message.
It gives you a good idea of the economic study behind an investment project, and therefore it shows the viability of the project.
At the beginning, I didn't know how to read an invoice, but now I can prepare invoices. I can read them, I can make them, I can do everything.
On a national level, the Ministry of Labour and Employment has decided to provide a budget of 50 million euros over 2 years to be dedicated to professional training programmes for refugee and asylum seekers. The objective is clear: to speed up the assimilation of this potential workforce into the Italian economy.
For more on this, let's bring in Leonard Doyle, who's the spokesperson for the UN Migration Agency. He joins us from Geneva. Leonard, thank you so much for speaking to France 24. This plan was, as far as we know, presented back in September 2017. How effective has it been so far?
Well, I mean, the big issue for Italy in particular, where the vast majority of the migrants coming from West Africa show up, is that most of them really will probably, in all likelihood, not get their asylum appeals accepted. They will be rejected as refugees. And then the question is what happens to them. So the big issue is they then tend to hang around the country for at least 2 years waiting for an appeal. They're technically allowed to work. It's very difficult. But I think what we're looking at here is an attempt to get some integration going, to get something productive happening in society.
So you've just talked about this attempt of integration, but is it possible to reap any economic benefits from this plan?
Well, I mean, the problem is that with irregular migration, as we call it, there's a huge economic cost to any country. So if you can think that there's 180,000 irregular migrants being housed in Italy at the moment. These are asylum seekers, but although many of them won't get it. Being housed by the Italian authorities, this costs the budget a huge amount of money. Charities who are housing them get paid about €35 per day per migrant. So the problem is they're open centres, so they spend the day maybe hanging around, not doing very much, certainly not adding to their skills, and eventually will be invited to return home to their countries of origin. But there's surely a better way to do this than have people, waste their lives, if you like, hanging around, maybe getting up to no good. Why not get them into something productive, as in this case, where you're learning about the skills they're learning, which whether they stay in Europe or whether they are returned home will become useful to them.
You're saying this is a better way to integrate these migrants and refugees. But of course, there is a cost involved. It has been financed with EU funds. Can we see other European countries trying to adopt it anytime soon?
Just to pick you up a little bit on the cost, I mean, the costs involved in the so-called migration crisis are enormous. The cost of running a naval ship in the Mediterranean to pick people out of the sea is vast and dwarfs the cost of a small little integration project like this, which seems to be showing great success. Other countries indeed are trying, probably not to the same extent, because Italy has had the full belt of the people coming in. They're all landing on Italy's shores, and they're finding that they're having to deal with them, and they're incredibly generous in how they've dealt with them, notwithstanding some problems in the political scene. I mean, we were reading today in the Washington Post about an Italian ski resort which has been in financial difficulties, and now a group of migrants are working with a restaurateur to build igloos, of all things, where tourists can be housed for €100 a night, and that seems to be a success. So here's another example of things happening. Schools in Milan and Bergamo are taking children to the area for field trips. So, I mean, it also kind of reduces some of the hostility that tends to occur between what they call the host communities and migrants. So when they understand that they're there to help and can help, I think it helps enormously.
Leonard Doyle, thank you for speaking to us from Geneva about that integration plan that's been implemented in Italy for migrants and refugees. Time for a short break now, but don't go anywhere. More news coming up shortly.